5 women, abandoned to die by their families and loved ones, left alone in the middle of a snowstorm, until the Lakota found them. But will they manage to survive? Or will their past catch up with them once again? By the way, we noticed something small. Most people who watch these stories aren't actually subscribed to the channel. Maybe we get caught up in the moment, or just forget to hit the button. But your support truly helps us keep creating stories like this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. The wind cut through them like a knife. The snowstorm poured endlessly from the sky, and the white blanket swallowed the women's weakened steps. Moving through the snow that buried them up to their ankles became more impossible with every breath. But turning back wasn't an option, because going back was the same as death. At the front of the group walked Anna Keller, once a strong, upright woman. Her steps had always carried determination, but now her body was trembling. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her hands showed purple through the torn ends of her gloves. Still, she had no intention of stopping. The women behind her carried the shadow of exhaustion in their eyes, and if Anna stopped, they would all fall. Just one step behind her, Martha Braun had collapsed onto her knees, panting for breath. Her thick brown hair had frozen solid, delicate ice crystals hanging from the ends. Her eyes were blank, almost fainting. She had once been the strongest among them. On the settler's farm, she rose before dawn, lifted heavy loads, finished the work all on her own. But betrayal had shattered even her strength. Her husband's brother had looked her straight in the eyes as he stole everything from her home, her land, her honor. Then he had thrown her into the storm, into the darkness. Martha's strength was still there somewhere, but in the icy cold, its spark had gone out. Anna crouched down and gripped her shoulder. "Get up," she said, her voice hoarse but stubborn. Martha turned her head. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Anna pressed her forehead to hers, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Don't let them win." 2 women were walking behind them, clinging to each other. Clara Fisher had once been the most cheerful, most talkative of them all. She had sung in halls, filled the air with laughter. But when her boss decided she was no longer useful, he threw her out without a moment's hesitation. Now, in the snow, she hugged herself tight, trying to hold on to her own warmth. That joyful laughter was gone, replaced only by pain. Beside her walked Johanna Bauer, her face expressionless, her eyes hollow. She had lost what was dearest to her own child. Her family had ignored a mother's pleas, torn the baby from her arms, and called it weak, useless. In that moment, the warmth inside Johanna had died. Now she walked, her steps soulless, carrying nothing but the weight of grief and anger. At the back of the group, holding her ribs, was Sophia Wagner. They had beaten her and thrown her out. Her ribs were broken, her breath shallow, but she still hadn't given up. With every step, blood filled her mouth. Her breath caught, yet her eyes burned with defiance. Her gaze said, "They tried to kill me, but I'm still here." 5 women, all bound by the same fate. Their families, their husbands, their bosses, their brothers, all had treated them as burdens and cast them aside. But what they called a burden was, in truth, unyielding will. In the middle of the snowstorm, they had found each other. And now the same fate, the same fury, was dragging them forward step by step. Suddenly, the silence broke. A deep, guttural sound rose through the howl of the storm. At first, Anna's heart nearly stopped. She strained her ears. Then it came again, low, threatening growls. In the darkness, 2 yellow eyes glowed. Then another, and another. They slipped out from the shadows of the trees. Their ribs stuck out from hunger, their teeth gleamed wolves. Martha clutched Anna's arm. Clara took a step back. Johanna's face creased with fear for the first time. Sophia's breathing quickened. The 5 women, with bare hands and no weapons, were surrounded. The leader of the wolves stepped forward. His movements were silent, his eyes shining with hunger. His advance across the snow was like the dance of a killer who knew his prey. Drool hung from his jaws, freezing as it touched the ground. The women's breath lingered in the air like pale smoke. Anna grabbed a thin branch from the ground. The trembling stick in her hand wasn't a weapon, but retreat wasn't an option. She clenched her teeth, locked eyes with the wolf. "If you're going to take me," she thought, "you'll have to fight first." The wolf lunged. Time slowed. Anna shoved Martha aside, swinging the stick. Snow burst into the air where the branch struck the wolf's side, but the beast felt no pain. The other wolves tightened the circle. Clara screamed. Johanna staggered back. Sophia raised her fist despite the agony in her ribs. And then a whistle cut through the sky. Thin, sharp, deadly. The wolf's body jolted, roared, and collapsed into the snow. An arrow had pierced its heart. Then a second arrow. Then a third. Figures appeared out of the darkness. Dressed in heavy furs, bows drawn, their faces hidden in shadows. As the women stared frozen in shock, the wolves retreated in fear. Within seconds, they were gone, swallowed by the storm's white veil. Now strangers stood before the women. They approached with heavy, silent steps. At their head, a tall warrior, his face marked with resolve. His eyes glowed in the dark. He looked at them. Silence stretched. Then words spilled from his lips in a foreign tongue. The women didn't understand. Martha whispered, her voice shaking. What do we do now? Anna's eyes locked on the warrior. His fur-covered body, the bow still in his hand, that determined gaze. For a moment, time stopped. Then Anna parted her cracked lips. Her voice barely came out. Help us. A shadow flickered across the warrior's face. He narrowed his eyes, studied the women. Then, with a brief nod, he signaled to the men beside him. Before Anna could say another word, her knees gave out, and she fell into the snow. But just as she thought she'd hit the ground, strong hands caught her. After that, only darkness. From the darkness came a scent first, smoke, resin, earth, and the sharpness of wild herbs. Then came warmth, a heat that melted nerves ready to snap like a thin branch, seeping into the bones and burning gently. When Anna opened her eyes, the crooked lines of the ceiling danced with the flickering light. Behind the stretched animal hide, the shadows outside shifted and moved. She breathed in, and the warmth filling her chest scraped the rust from her throat. A pair of hands pressed gently on her shoulder. You need to rest, said a woman's voice low, calm, yet commanding. Anna turned her head. A woman knelt beside her, long black hair braided with tiny beads, eyes carrying both sternness and mercy. She held out a wooden bowl. The dark liquid inside numbed Anna's tongue with the taste of bitter herbs. But then a spreading warmth ran through her body, as if a blanket were being laid over her bones. I am White Deer, the woman said. What fire burns and what wind freezes is healed only by patience. Rest. Anna wetted her lips and whispered. The others. White Deer gave a small nod. They live. They are weak, but alive. The door flap shifted open. The figure entering carried a heavy presence with him. Fur hung to his shoulders, a bow on his back, blades at his belt catching a metallic glint from the unsteady light. His eyes were dark and steady. He was the warrior whose arrows they had heard among the wolves. Chaska, said White Deer, glancing at Anna. The warrior bowed his head slightly in greeting. Can she speak? White Deer felt Anna's pulse, then moved aside. Chaska studied Anna's face for a long time. You were not meant to be here, he said, calm, steady, like water over stone. Anna did not look away. I know that. Yet here you are. You saved us. To save is to carry the future, Chaska replied. We brought you here. That does not mean we are bound to keep you with us. But if last night we loosed our arrows against the wolves, today we cannot hide our conscience. Anna's lips curved with a faint trace of gratitude. She had no strength to say more. With a brief nod, Chaska left. As the flap closed, the sounds of children's running feet and the snorts of horses drifted in. Later that day, when Anna managed to push off the weight on her knees, White Deer guided her outside. She was met not with a cutting cold, but a steady coolness as if here, snow fell differently, fire burned differently. Beyond the tents, life moved. A child held a feather on a stick to the wind. Two young warriors practiced drawing and releasing their bows in silence. An old man patiently combed a horse's mane. There was order harsh, but fair. Martha leaned against a log not far off, gathering her breath, a stubborn line fixed at her lips. Clara sat by the fire, stretching her hands toward it, pulling them back, then reaching out again as if trying not just to warm herself, but to find her way back. Johanna stared at the ground, rubbing a small charm between her hands, as if it could bring back a voice from time itself. Sophia pressed cloth against her ribs as she walked slowly. Every step was a statement of will. When Chaska saw them outside, he straightened, his eyes narrowing with cautious watchfulness. He spoke briefly with a few elders. Glances passed back and forth like messengers, showing clearly that the women's presence was being debated. These lands, without needing a name, for the wind, fire, and silence already spoke their rule, did not easily accept strangers. The tribe remembered mercy, but the shadow of long experience held them to caution. That night, the wind brushed against the edges of the tents, slipping inside. The women sat by the same fire. Flames drew restless lines across their faces. The silence stretched, thoughts rising to their lips only to retreat again. Finally, Martha broke it with a hard sentence. "We can't stay here forever." Clara forced a small smile, trying to mask the pain. "Forever doesn't exist." Johanna's voice was heavy as lead, going back. "It isn't just to show we're alive. I have a reason." Her eyes lost themselves in the past, where a tiny body had been torn from her arms. Sophia tossed wood into the fire, pressing her side. "We all have reasons." At the same time, two warriors keeping watch at the edge of the camp saw a shifting shadow in the dark. A hulking shape, a heavy breath. A faint growl rose from the brush. Wolves were too smart to come back. This sound was lower, more opportunistic, the sniffing of a hungry pack of dogs, or the impatient steps of a stranger on the trail. The shadows stirred. For an instant, a horse reared back in fright. The rope pulled tight. The stake rattled. Panic spread at the stables. Tension swept through the camp, threatening to explode into chaos at one wrong move. Anna rose instinctively. She forgot the weight in her legs, snow gathering on her shoes as she ran toward the stables. At the same moment, Chaska leapt from the shadows, two paths converging on the same point. The terrified horse had fallen sideways, tangled in its own rope. As Anna rushed forward, she spotted the knot tied and left carelessly. Her hand darted to it, nails filling with snow. Chaska dropped to his knees, steadying the horse's head, murmuring low, calming words. Anna twisted the knot backwards, freeing it in a single pull. The rope loosened, and the horse released the last of its panic in a burst of warm breath. As order returned, the shadows slipped away, footsteps vanishing across the snow, leaving no clear trace of what creature they belonged to. Silence. Then, breathing eased around them. Chaska looked at Anna. In his gaze was both surprise and approval. "Clever," he said shortly. "You undid the knot backwards." Anna blew on her numbed fingers. "Like undoing fear backwards," she answered with a faint smile. "Free the ropes, and breath opens too." In that moment, the eyes of nearby warriors and elders shifted, no longer seeing a stranger, but a useful ally. The next day, White Deer pushed the women to move more. "Strength doesn't come from lying down," she said. They showed Martha how to carry wood properly, balancing the weight so it didn't crush her breath. Clara took charge of the fire, learning to guide smoke and feed flame without smothering it. Her quick hands matched the careful rhythm that replaced her old laughter. Johanna worked beside White Deer with herbs, crushing, smelling, heating, mixing. The emptiness inside her filled slightly with the pride of being useful. Sophia walked in short steps, opening her lungs. The ache in her ribs rang like a bell, reminding her she was alive. Toward evening, Chaska called Anna aside. "You're learning the ways here," he said. "Your eyes are careful. Careful eyes tell apart needless enemies from needed friends." Anna straightened. "We know our enemies, but we'll have to test our friends too." Chaska studied her. "You want to go back?" Anna lifted her gaze from the sparks at the fire to his eyes. "Yes." "Why?" "Because they tried to bury us. If we shake the earth, their hands will get dirty. I want to see those hands." That night, the women's voices grew harder. Martha, through clenched teeth, swore, "We'll ruin their peace." Clara's words cut like a thin blade. "Not just ruin it. Make sure they can't do it again." Johanna added in a breath, "I will search for my son." Sophia, opening her fists to the fire, said, "And no one will ever raise a hand against us again." At the camp's center, the elders formed a circle. Chaska stepped into the middle with measured strides. His gaze swept over the fire, the shadows, the women, all orbiting one question. How long does hospitality last? Who decides the limit of mercy? One elder, his voice carved deep by years, spoke. "Winter is long. Burdens are heavy. To open hearts is to load the hands." Another looked at the women. "There is fire in their eyes. If you tame fire, it warms. If not, it burns. Chaska opened and closed his palms to the flames. Last night, a rope was untied. The fire of panic was smothered. The strangers saw the knot. After a few breaths, the decision was quietly made. The women would stay until they healed. But after that, either their paths would part or converge depending on where they chose to go. In the tribe's tongue, this was both mercy and a test. When the decision was announced, a low sigh of relief spread. But with it came a shadow too, the shadow of what lay ahead. As the night deepened, Anna remained by the fire alone. She reached out, watching the brightest spark. In the center of the flames was a hollow space, glowing silently. She thought of her own hollow dug by cold, fear, betrayal. If she didn't fill it with purpose, the darkness would. She straightened her back. "We will return," she whispered. "But not to the ending they wrote for us." The flap moved. Chasko appeared from the shadows. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll bring you a knife. You'll learn to hold it." Anna lifted her head. "Do I need a weapon?" Chaska's eyes caught the sparks as he gave a faint smile. "Not a weapon, a reminder for your hands. The same way you undid knots, ropes, fear." Then he slipped away silently. The crackle of the fire stretched into the night like a promise. As the women slept, the wind carried a new trail, the trail of return, of confrontation, of justice. And the snow seemed to fall not to cover those tracks, but to make them shine brighter. When the gray light of dawn spread over the camp like a thin veil, the women's eyes still hadn't fully escaped the weight of sleep. But the sounds outside, the neighing of horses, the laughter of children, the solid thud of wood striking wood reminded them that life was going on. When they stepped outside, a great fire stood at the center of the camp, smoke rising into the sky. Around it, young warriors practiced their morning drills with bows in hand. Each arrow cut through the air with a whisper, and when it struck the target's center, the sound carried the echo of determination. Anna watched them over her shoulder. She still didn't have the knife Chaska had promised her, but the shadow of that promise lived in her eyes. "Today," she thought, "my hands will start to remember." Martha came close and whispered softly, "They'll never trust us. They act like we're guests, but deep down, we're always outsiders." Anna kept her eyes on the young men training. "You're right," she said, "but we'll learn to carve our own way. We can't ask for their respect, we'll have to take it." It wasn't long before Chaska appeared, a fox fur on his shoulders, a short knife in his hand flashing with sharp light. He stood in front of Anna, gripping the handle and holding it out to her. "Take it." Without hesitation, Anna wrapped her fingers around the hilt. The cold metal sent a shiver through her fingertips. With a quick move, Chaska adjusted her stance. "Don't just hold a knife to cut. Hold it to find your balance. Not as a burden in your hand, but as part of your body." Meanwhile, Martha, Clara, Johanna, and Sophia were watching. In their eyes there was no envy, only curiosity. Because the knife was a clear symbol, survival, and the right to rule one's own fate. Chaska showed Anna a few simple moves, slicing through the air, flipping the knife, and catching it, driving it into the ground. With each try, Anna grew more confident. Her breath quickened, her arms shook, but in her eyes a new spark appeared. By midday, the women had started to take on more duties in the camp. Martha drew the men's attention as she carried stacks of wood. Her sharp gaze and upright posture proved she had found her strength again. Clara sat by the fire with the children, humming songs. The children laughed and joined in, and for the first time in a long while, a nearly genuine smile spread across Clara's face. Johanna continued learning from white deer, crushing and mixing herbs. The sharp scent that clung to her hands gave her the feeling of a new identity. Sophia, though struggling, began short walks, asserting control over her body step by step. But the peace of the camp did not last. In the afternoon, the sky suddenly darkened, the wind picked up. One warrior came running to Chaska, speaking quickly. Anna didn't understand the words, but the seriousness on his face told her everything. Danger was approaching. Chaska gave short, firm orders. The men readied their bows. The women gathered the children. The air grew heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Before long, shadows appeared between the trees. But this time it wasn't wolves. Several men on horseback moved slowly through the darkness, their faces hidden behind heavy coverings. As they neared the camp's edge, their voices rang out, harsh, mocking laughter. One of them shouted, We know what you're hiding here. Hand it over, or we'll put out your fire." Anna's heart raced. Were they talking about them? About her and the others? Her eyes turned to Chaska. His face was expressionless, but his hand was already on his bow. Once again, the women's fate was about to hang on words spoken by others. Martha clenched her teeth. Again? Again someone wants to dictate our lives. Sophia stepped forward, straight despite her pain. "No, this time we won't stay silent." Chaska glanced at the women. In his eyes was a strange mix, trust or a test. Then he spoke to them in a low voice. "If you're to stay here, you must learn to guard your fire. Because those who don't guard their fire lose their light." At that moment, Anna's fingers tightened around the knife's hilt. In her chest, fear was replaced by something else, anger. She turned to her friends and whispered, "This is our trial. The day they drove us out is over. Now we decide." Their eyes locked on one another. Martha's breath grew heavy. Clara's hands trembled, but her lips parted. "Then we stand." Johanna nodded quietly. Tears slid down Sophia's face, but her voice was steady. "They tried to kill us, but we're still alive, and they won't put this fire out." Outside, the wind howled. The horses' hooves struck harder against the snow. The first spark of conflict was about to fly. The women's eyes no longer held fear, but readiness. And right then, the first arrow split the air. The sound of the arrow cutting through the air was as sharp as a blade tearing flesh. The man at the front of the riders toppled to the ground before he could even scream. Blood from the arrow in his chest spread across the white snow like a dark stain. Silence lasted only a few heartbeats. Then came shouts of rage, the clash of metal, and the neighing of horses. The fight had begun. Chaska fired another arrow without hesitation. The other warriors drew their bows at the same time. At the edge of the camp, women and children were pulled back at once. White Deer shielded the children with her own body, dragging them into the tents. But Anna and her friends stood frozen at the fire. In that moment, the same question rang inside each of them. Should we run, or should we fight? Anna's hands trembled, but not from the cold this time. The knife Chaska had given her rested at her side like a small weight. That weight meant a choice. She fought to steady her heartbeat and looked at Martha. In Martha's eyes blazed the fury of someone who had suffered injustice for years. "Enough," Martha hissed through her teeth. "They drove us out, dragged us, left us to die. Now here they are again. We will not run." Just then, one of the riders charged into the camp. A long blade glinted in his hand as he urged his horse forward with a shout. Clara's eyes screamed though no sound left her throat, her cry trapped inside her chest. The rider was coming straight at them. Chaska was locked with another enemy. The other warriors were fighting at the outer ring. In that moment, at the camp's center, the women's fate lay in their own hands. Without time to think, Anna drew her knife. She dropped to her knees, grabbed a thick root buried under the snow, and held it in her other hand. The rider was almost upon them. Sophia, clutching her side in pain, threw herself in front of Martha. "No," she cried. At that instant, Anna lunged with all her strength, driving the branch into the horse's foreleg. The animal stumbled, and the rider lost his balance. Martha seized the chance, yanking him down and hurling him to the ground. As he tried to raise his blade, Anna's short knife was faster. The glint of metal caught the reflection of his fear, and with a single strike, his hand fell to the ground. The man screamed and crawled back. The women were breathless. The knife and stick shaking in their hands were no longer just tools of survival. For the first time, they had struck back. In that instant, fear gave way to a new feeling, power. Clara whispered with a trembling voice, "We can do this." Johanna clenched her teeth and said, "We're only getting started." The battle raged on with full fury. The Lakota warriors pushed the attackers back one by one, but there were still many of them, at least 10 more. The cries of children, the screams of women, and the sparks flying from the fire all mixed together. Chaska roared an order. "Protect the fire." His eyes turned toward Anna's group. This was a test, and they all knew it. Martha snatched up the long blade from the fallen enemy. Her face was set with resolve. Clara swung a burning branch from the fire. The flame's light pierced her eyes. Sophia rose despite the pain in her ribs, clutching a stone. Johanna, silent but deadly calm, stooped and picked up a fallen arrow. When the second wave came, they didn't back down. The women formed a circle. Another rider charged in, and Clara swung the burning branch into the horse's face. The animal reared with a shriek, throwing the man to the ground. Martha roared and leapt upon him. Johanna drove the arrow like a dagger. Sophia's stone cracked against another man's temple. The fire inside Anna grew with every moment. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, seeing her husband's family dragging her through the snow, shouting weak at her. Then she opened them again, staring at the enemy before her. "We're still here," she screamed, and swung her knife. The fight stretched on, blood and breath staining the snow. At last, the riders began to retreat. Screaming, cursing, bleeding, they stumbled back. Some dead, some wounded, collapsed into the snow. The Lakota warriors closed the circle tighter. One last arrow flew, and another enemy dropped onto the white ground. Then silence fell. The women stood around the fire, gasping for breath. Their weapons still trembled in their hands, their eyes shadowed with death. But there was something else too, the first taste of victory. White Deer appeared quietly, her eyes filled with both amazement and respect. "You guarded the fire," she said simply. Chaska walked toward them slowly. His gaze swept over each of them, then lingered on Anna's blood-stained knife. A long silence passed. "You are no longer just guests," he said. "You are guardians of this fire now." The words echoed in their hearts. The voices of those who had abandoned them were now just ghosts of the past. Here, in the snow, a new identity had been born. But as Anna looked to the horizon, she knew this victory was only the first step. For the true enemy still waited, far away, in the shadow of their old lives. And that reckoning would be far bloodier, far more dangerous. The silence that fell over the camp carried the strange calm that follows a battle. As snow covered the blood on the ground, the howl of the wind no longer sounded like anger, but like a deep breath. The women still stood around the fire. Knives, stones, burning branches, all still trembled in their hands. But this trembling wasn't from fear, it was the weight of adrenaline and of newfound strength. White Deer walked up to them, looking into each of their eyes. "Fear," she said softly, "kept you alive. But courage, that made you human." Then she bent down, took the burned branch from Clara's hands, and set it back into the fire. "You're no longer just foreign women. This camp has heard your breath too." That night they said little by the fire. The images of the fight replayed again and again before their eyes. Martha remembered the man she had dragged across the ground. Clara thought of the flames of the branch in her hand. Johanna quietly relived the moment she wounded someone for the first time with her own hands. Sophia couldn't shake the heavy thud of the stone she had thrown. And Anna still sat with the knife Chaska had given her. Frozen blood along its edge glimmered under the moonlight. Chaska sat in silence on the other side of the fire. His eyes watched not the women, but the darkness far beyond. Yet now and then, his gaze met Anna's, and without a word, he looked away. Those silent exchanges weighed more than any words could. The next day, the traces of battle were cleared. The injured horses were tended to, the bodies of the enemy carried far away. The camp was quiet, but it was the quiet of preparation, not fear. Everyone knew. The men who came yesterday were only the first. A greater storm was coming. The women now moved as part of the camp. Martha kept carrying wood with her strong arms. Clara worked with the children, keeping the fire alive. Johanna learned from White Deer to make salves with herbs. Sophia, despite her broken ribs, stubbornly pushed herself to walk longer, strengthening her breath. Anna, at every chance, practiced the knife drills Chaska had shown her. The steel was no longer foreign in her hands. One evening, as the sunset cast long shadows across the snow, the women gathered at the fire. Martha drew a heavy breath. "We can't stay here forever," she said. "One day, we must return." Clara nodded right away. "Yes, they thought we were dead. They buried us. But we're alive, and we have to show them." Johanna's voice was sharp. "I want my son. They took him from me, and I will take him back." Sophia closed her eyes, whispering through her pain. "For me, it's not just about survival. I'll show them I can't be broken anymore." After hearing her friends, Anna took a deep breath. What brought us here was their cruelty. But what comes next, we will write it ourselves. We will return, not only for revenge, for justice. Just then, Chaska came near. He had heard their words. After a short silence, he spoke in a low voice. "You're not ready. But if you must go, you will not go alone." His words struck like lightning among them. Martha leaned forward. You'll help us. A faint, almost invisible smile touched Chaska's lips. You are stubborn, and sometimes stubbornness leads to the truth. They think they destroyed you. If you leave no mark, then they'll be right. So yes, I'll be with you. That night, the decision was made. The women would return and face those who had left them to die. Chaska and a few warriors would go with them. At dawn, the horses were readied at the edge of the camp. For the first time in their lives, the women were about to ride. Martha gripped the reins tightly, struggling but managing to mount. Clara held her breath in fear, but quickly found her balance. Johanna sat on her horse like a silent statue. Sophia, despite her pain, managed to sit tall. And Anna, on her horse, fixed her eyes on the horizon. There, the town awaited the place that would force them to face their past. As they rode, the snow's silence surrounded them. With every step, the horses' hooves thudded into the ground. Gray clouds drifted slowly across the sky. No one spoke. Each carried the same weight inside, the cost of return. When the sun set on the horizon, the shadow of the town appeared in the distance. Anna's chest tightened. This was their hell, and also the place they were born. Now they were returning, but they were no longer the same women. Martha exhaled sharply through her teeth. They'll be afraid of their own ghosts. Clara lifted her head, whispering with a cold smile, We're not ghosts. We're alive, and we've come back. Johanna's eyes filled with tears as the distant church bell rang. There, my son is there. Sophia narrowed her eyes at the town. And for me, the reckoning starts here. Anna lifted her knife to the sky. This time, we decide, she said. With the light shining in their eyes, they rode step by step toward the darkened town. What awaited them was not just revenge, but the beginning of a revolution. When the lights of the town appeared in the distance, the silence inside the women grew heavier. Each of them remembered their last moments before being cast out. A freezing night, doors slammed in their faces, voices saying, You're no longer useful. The cold slap of betrayal. And now they were returning to the same place, but they were different. No longer broken, helpless, banished women, they were warriors who had guarded the fire and stood tall in the middle of battle. As the horses' hooves echoed on the stone streets, the townsfolk came out one by one. Whispers rose. A woman pulled back her curtain and stared in disbelief. The women who had been sent into the arms of death had returned. Like ghosts, someone murmured. But they weren't ghosts. In their eyes burned the resolve of those who had come back from death. On their breath lingered the sharp scent of vengeance. Martha stepped forward, her face hard as stone, her steps firm. She fixed her eyes on the man standing in the square. She knew him. Tom, her husband's brother. Once family, now an enemy. The cup of wine in his hand fell to the ground, and for a moment his face paled. Martha, he said, forcing a mocking laugh. So you're still not dead. Martha's eyes narrowed. You thought you buried me. But under the soil, my fire grew. Silence shattered. Clara stepped forward, turning her face to her former employer. It was you who threw me out. You kept your warm bed while sending me into the cold. Look at me now. Can you feel even a shred of shame? The man spat at the ground, but fear flickered in his eyes. Clara's voice grew sharper. You thought I was dead. What you see isn't death. It's resistance. Johanna's gaze turned to the church at the edge of the square. There, on the steps, stood a small boy, eyes wide, stunned. Beside him was the woman who had raised him, Johanna's own sister-in-law. Johanna's knees shook as she stepped forward, but her eyes did not. Give me back my son. The woman cried out, shielding the boy. You can't be a mother. A bitter smile crossed Johanna's face. I learned motherhood through pain. Now I'm taking him back. The boy's tiny hands hesitantly reached toward hers. For a moment, the whole world went silent. Sophia, meanwhile, spotted her father's face in the crowd, the man who had beaten her, broken her ribs, and thrown her out. He dropped his gaze, but Sophia's voice crashed like thunder. You call me a burden. But my burden was never your blows, it was your cowardice. And I no longer carry it. At that moment, the town sheriff stepped forward. His gun was drawn, but he did not fire. He scanned the square, his eyes lingering on the women. Finally, he took a deep breath and shook his head. We were wrong, he said quietly. We sent them to die. We stayed silent. We allowed it. A murmur swept through the crowd. Slowly, the sheriff slid his gun back into its holster. Today is the day to speak, and their words are heavier than our silence. Then Tom, shaking with rage, drew his gun. If they came back, I'll finish the job. His fingers squeezed, the trigger time slowed. Clara screamed, but Anna had already leapt forward. Her knife flashed, cutting through the air, and drove into Tom's arm. The gun never fired. It clattered to the ground. Tom collapsed to his knees with a cry of pain. Anna's face was set with iron resolve. You tried to kill us, but we are still here, and you will never be the same again. The square fell silent. No one moved to help Tom. They left him there, abandoned just as he had abandoned Martha. That silence weighed heavier than revenge itself. For now the town had seen the truth. These women had not been defeated. Martha, Clara, Johanna, Sophia, and Anna stood side by side. In their eyes burned the same fire. From the shadows, Chaska and the Lakota warriors stepped into view, watching with quiet pride. These women were no longer alone. They had carved a new path for themselves. Anna turned to the townsfolk and spoke loudly. You ignored us. You left us to die, but we are alive. From now on, you will speak our names not with fear, but with respect, because this world isn't only yours. It's ours too. Then the women mounted their horses and rode out of the square, leaving behind a town stunned, silent, and forced to face its guilt. As the sun broke through the darkness, 5 women and the Lakotas riding with them headed into the endless whiteness. The future was uncertain, but they no longer felt fear, because now they owned their fate. Anna lifted her head toward the horizon. From her lips came a single word, echoing in all their hearts. We will live.